Good afternoon. My name is Hillary Keller, and you're joining us live here at Ferno's Customer Experience Center. We invite you to come to the Customer Experience Center and take a tour for yourself, check out all of our new products and how they can help your agency. If you're unable to travel to Wilmington, we can also do a virtual tour. So just reach out to us or your sales rep and we'll get that set up for you. Today's webcast is about safe patient handling, and I'm going to be joined here by Tom Cox, our Director of Training.
Thanks, Hillary. Welcome to our webcast. We're glad you could join us. I'm here today with Brian Fass, founder and owner of the Fit Responder. It's great to have you here today, Brian.
Good to be here, Tom.
Throughout today's session, you'll be able to send us questions using the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll get to those questions near the end of our session. Now, Brian specializes in training public safety organizations in everything from fitness to health and safety programs, as well as patient handling. He's a paramedic, strength coach, and what else, Brian?
Tom, I've got a bachelor's degree in sports medicine. I'm a certified and licensed athletic trainer. Done a fair amount of manual therapy, specializing in spine, postural rehab, sports performance, as well as now focusing on injury prevention through fitness and ergonomics and public safety.
Well, many of you might recognize Brian from his previous Ferno webcasts or from his work on our injury-free program. He's been a great friend to EMS community, and I dare say he's presented a on-the-job injury or two. Now, shortly we'll be launching another training segment on our popular injury-free website. We'll tell you about how to find injury-free at the end of today's session. In the initial series of videos on injury-free, Brian taught us about diet and exercise and how to stay fit and healthy while on the job. Brian, tell us about the next segment of injury-free that you're going to help us with.
Tom, this next segment of injury-free, we're really going to focus on some of the behaviors that have been handed down from generation to generation in EMS. We're going to look at two specific things today. There's 3 modules to the total program, but we're going to look at moving patients bed to bed, one of our biggest injury drivers, as well as showing you guys an alternative way to get patients out of an awkward lift situation.
We're looking forward to that. Brian and Dan, who's going to be our assistant today, have agreed to demonstrate some of these techniques that you'll see on the new patient movement edition at Injury Free. So Dan and Brian, why don't you take it away?
Let's do it. All right, let's talk about a bed-to-bed transfer. One of the things that has been handed down from generation to generation in EMS. We've all been taught to move a patient from stretcher to our hospital bed with a sheet drag, because that's what the patient's laying on. However, the sheet is not an approved patient transfer device, and it adds friction. So if your 300-pound patient is on that sheet and you pull them from bed to bed, you're in theory adding around 20 to 25 pounds of weight due to friction. Plus, it's hard to grip that sheet. So what we can do is use a tool that most of us have on our ambulances, which is a flexible stretcher. Most of these flexible stretchers nowadays have a nice vinyl backing, so it helps to reduce the friction. So now, not only do I have an additional handhold, I've reduced the weight of my patient by upwards of 50%. So I'd much rather move a 150-pound patient than that 300-pound patient. Plus, it allows us one other thing. Nobody has to be on the opposite side of the patient. I can put my partner and I on the same side so we can get in a good, safe, athletic stance where we can generate power, moving the patient from bed to bed. The patient's more comfortable and we're in a better lift situation. So what we're going to do, grab a hold of the flexible stretcher, drop my hips down into that athletic stance, head up, shoulders back, abs are tight, ready, brace, slide. And by doing that, patient comes over nice and quick. We didn't put any effort forth at all. Patient's comfortable. We're maximizing our mechanical advantage and able to do it easier and safer.
That's great stuff, guys. I wish I'd have paid attention to things like that when I was still in the field. And like many of you probably do, when I was younger, I relied on my strength and my youth to kind of manhandle the patients into a position that I wanted. And it's obviously not the thing to do. We're talking about the longevity of your careers here. So, Brian, what else do you have for us?
So, Tom, this next scenario we're going to go over is what I would call an awkward lift situation. We are frequently called into an environment where the patient's on the floor. They're in a bathtub. They're on the toilet. They're in an overstuffed chair or even a dialysis chair. And currently, all we're going to do is go back to what we've been taught. We're going to go hands-on with the patient, so to speak, manhandle them out of that situation, or even worse, we're going to grab a bed sheet, which is not an approved patient lifting device, to try to get this patient up out of the chair. So what we've done is we've taken our flexible stretcher, and to use it as a tool, just folded it into thirds. So what we're going to do, obviously having our transport tool nearby, we're going to feed this behind the back of the patient. And then to increase patient comfort and to increase our mechanical advantage, we're almost going to swaddle the patient. We're going to bring it across the patient's body. And by doing this, we're able to get a good grip. And now we've got mechanical advantage to our benefit. I can go in a split stance, chin up, head up, chest up, so my back is flat. And we can very clearly call out, ready, brace, lift. Patient's going to come flying up out of the chair. At this point, we're going to grab a holdover, do our assisted pivot down, and sit her into our transfer device. If we were afraid for some reason that the patient's feet may have slipped, we can simply block her feet with ours. We could get a third responder in that position. What's also really nice about this technique is if we had a bariatric in this chair, it would allow us to put 2 more people behind the chair. Now we've got 2 pulling and 2 pushing. So we can use this tool in various scenarios to increase mechanical advantage, take the strain off our bodies, and get our job done a lot safer.
Wow, that's great. Thanks, Brian. I wish I would have used some of those techniques when I was in the field. It's really good to know that by making a few minor adjustments and taking advantage of some very simple techniques, you can prevent injury to you and to your patient. That's great stuff. Let's take a couple of questions. Remember, you can send us questions on the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. The first one's from Jim. Do you recommend leaving rubber or vinyl transfer products such as the Manta on the cot after the patient is moved? I've had patients complain about too much heat.
We don't really recommend leaving the flexible stretcher or the transfer tool on the stretcher at all times because there are going to be calls where you just don't need it or it's outright going to be in the way. So we really recommend, and the benefit to the flexible stretcher is folding it up and keeping it behind the head of the stretcher. That way it's there if and when you need it, and it's out of the way when you don't.
Okay, good. Next question from Joan. We struggle with lifting bariatric patients off the floor when they've fallen. Do you have any suggestions on getting the bariatric person off the floor and onto the cot?
Joan, that's a great question and one that we all deal with a lot. The safe answer is don't lift them. Wait for personnel, wait for adequate hands to be on scene to try to get that patient up off the ground and onto the stretcher. The benefit to using the flexible stretchers like we showed you today is they have multiple handholds. So we can treat the patient on scene, obviously per your local protocols, but don't move that patient until you have sufficient personnel that can distribute the load and the weight of that patient where you can use that tool to do the job safer. Because bottom line is we don't want you to get hurt.
Okay, great. Another question from Jose. We often have elderly patients with osteoporosis that have fallen and need medical care. What's the safest way to lift these fragile patients?
Oh, that's a good question too. Speaking from personal experience, I was never comfortable going on scene where I have this 98-pound patient on the floor, frail, osteoporotic, where the only way we could really pick them up was to grab them as best we could. And if you were like me, I was more concerned that I was going to hurt the patient as I lifted them. So the benefit now is instead of worrying so much about me hurting the patient where I'm not paying attention to my mechanics, I'll roll that patient very carefully onto the flexible stretcher. And now when we pick them up, we've distributed their weight, they're more comfortable, and we have better control of the environment so we're not putting ourselves at risk.
Keys to get a lot of help if you can, right?
Absolutely.
Let's take one more from Ron. If my cot is next to a king-size bed and the patient is in the middle of the bed, I find myself still bending over way too much. What's the best way to move them?
Another common scenario we see on the street. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Another common scenario that we see on the street is exactly that. Let's take it one step further. What about the king-size waterbed mattress where the patient's always in the middle? Simplest thing to do a traditional nursing roll the patient to their side, get that flexible stretcher underneath the patient. Now, before you put your stretcher up against the side of the bed, do a couple staggered slides where you can get yourself in a safe athletic position, move the patient a few inches at a time. Yeah, maybe you have to pull them 2 or 3 times, but now they're at the edge of the mattress where you can put your stretcher up against the bed, and now you and your partner or the additional personnel that have shown up on scene can safely transfer the patient from the bed onto the stretcher.
Good. Well, I'm sorry we're about out of time here, but I do want you to know if we didn't get to your question or you still want to ask one, we will respond by email later on. You can see our injury-free program at www.fernoinjuryfree.com. And not only can you watch online, but you can also download the injury-free app for an iPhone or Android device and watch a segment anytime you want. And a recording of today's webcast will also be available on our webcasting page. That's www.fernoems.com/webcasts. To contact Brian, go to fitnessfitresponder.com. That's fitresponder.com. And to contact us at Ferno, visit our website at fernoems.com or call us at 877-733-0911. Brian, thanks for taking time to be with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining us today. That's all for now. Remember, be safe out there.